Good afternoon to everyone. Just wanted to welcome you to our webinar. We'll get started here in just a few minutes. But while we're waiting, we'd love to know where you're joining us from and what you're working on, what you're hearing. So feel free to drop that information in the chat. Otherwise, looking forward to a really great session today. So thank you for joining us. Ooh, James, I'm joining from Oklahoma City. So thanks for joining us. Good to see one of my Oklahoma neighbors here. Some great representation from the West Coast. Welcome, folks. Welcome. Oh, Egypt. Great to see some global participation as well. Thank you very much. It's great. Andrew, where are you joining us from? Oh, you
I'm
already.
here in Steubenville, Ohio.
What's going on in Steubenville today?
Beautiful day. We haven't gotten rain in about 40 days, though. So
Wow.
I used to serve on the Soil and Water Board here, and a number of my friends are hurting pretty bad. So that's a bummer. But it's beautiful at least. Nice fall day.
Yeah, good, good. We got some natural irrigation this morning here in Oklahoma City. So nice to have that. It's been dry for the past couple weeks. So we'll get started here in just a minute, but again, just want to welcome everyone and thanks for letting us know where you're joining from. Good to see some folks from Nebraska. Oh, hi, Paul. Nice to see you. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you being here this morning. So we're about 2 minutes after the hour here, so we'll go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Luke Reynolds. I'm the Associate Director of Government and Public Affairs for the Irrigation Association. We're really thrilled that you're here to join us for our program today to talk about some of the USDA conservation programs and really how they can affect your business. Very pleased to be joined by Frank Tovez and Allison Aquino, and I'll give them a moment to introduce themselves here in just a few minutes. But before I do that, just a quick housekeeping. This webinar is eligible for one CEU if you're certified through the Irrigation Association. Just a reminder that you do need to stay for the entire duration of the webinar. And of course, you'll need to self-report at the conclusion of the webinar that you did attend. So just a brief housekeeping note there. If you have any questions, of course, please feel free to drop them in the chat. More than likely, we'll save our questions to the end and we'll allow our panelists to answer them. But if it works out, we might stop the webinar and get your questions answered sort of as they come up. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Andrew Morris, our Regulatory and Technical Affairs Associate Director, just to kind of kick things off and get us going.
Thanks, Luke. Welcome, everyone. I am the staff coordinator for the IA's Ag Advocacy Group. So some of you may have seen me there, and I'd love to talk to any of our members anytime about the topics we'll be presenting on today. We've been doing some research. We do some advocacy in these spaces. I'll actually drop a link in the chat to a place where we've published some articles with, I'd say, we're going beyond the main headlines and really trying to dig into how some of these programs directly affect the irrigation industry. So check out our research there. We have an article from a few months ago on EQIP, focusing in on what the big, beautiful bill means for EQIP. We wrote that before the bill passed, but the article, all the details in the article remain the same because at the time we analyzed it, there were no changes to how the EQIP program was funded compared to that. We should have an update article on that shortly. Also, on the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, or RCPP, we've been talking with some members who have taken advantage of this program, and we had a conversation as recently as yesterday on that one. So we are actually going to hold future content on that as we develop some additional research and thoughts there. So stay tuned for that. You can find it on that same webpage, and we may choose to do a webinar really doing a deep dive into that topic as well. So today we're going to be focusing mostly on EQIP and TSPs. I'm glad to have some great folks with deep knowledge there joining us. So thank you. And if you want to talk ag anytime, reach out to me here at the IA or any of us, and we'll connect you to the right person. Thanks so much, Luke.
Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. Thanks very much for that little intro. So before we dive really into the information, Frank and Allison, if you would just take a moment or two just to introduce yourselves, I'd appreciate it. And just to give everyone a heads up, Allison's going to speak first, and then we'll hand it over to Frank after that. But love to have the two of you just introduce yourselves and tell us where you're from and what you're about.
Frank, why don't you go first, and then I'll start my presentation.
Sure, why not? So I'm Frank Tovez, the president and CEO of Avid Water. We're a California-based irrigation design, build, construction company with 16 retail locations. So we focus primarily on agriculture, working directly with growers. We've been in the business since 1983 with one of our legacy companies, and we have currently 3 TSPs on staff.
And I'm Allison Aquino. I work for the Natural Resources Conservation Service. I'm on the National TSP branch. My official title is Regional Certifier. And prior to that, I was in an NRCS field office for about almost 18 years. So out there working directly with our farmers and ranchers and forestry folks. All right, I'm going to start sharing my screen here. There we go. So our technical service provider program is what I'm going to be focusing on today, and just kind of going through some of the basics and hopefully providing some details to this particular audience that, as was stated, is helpful for your business and just gives you a better overview of what opportunities there are there. So let's just start with the basics. What is a TSP? What is a technical service provider? So an NRCS certified technical service provider is a professional and can really be a wide variety of industries. It can be, you can be a biologist, you can be a forester, you can be a rangeland specialist. And for today's talk, we're obviously going to focus on engineering and irrigation specifically. So a professional, someone who's educated, has experience, might have a certification of some type, applies to be an NRCS certified TSP. They meet that set of requirements, and then they are certified to perform specific technical assistance, so related to our conservation practices, relating to our conservation planning process. A certified TSP certified for specific activities in specific states or territories, and the program's available nationally. So they're hired by our program participants, hired by those farmers, ranchers, forest landowners that we work with. They're hired by those customers to perform these specific sets of technical support. And it can be a conservation plan. It can be that initial planning process. It can be the design of our conservation practices. And we also have TSPs who support the technical parts of the installation and certify that those conservation practices have been completed. So TSPs are very independent, right? They're a professional in their own industry, and the NRCS program participant is their client, and they work together to complete those deliverables. Once a TSP is certified by NRCS, part of that process is they sign a certification agreement. It's a 3 or 4 page document, depending on how many services and locations you have. But it goes through a lot of the roles and responsibilities of the TSP. And I just picked out 3 here to show you today that I think are particularly relevant to this conversation. But there is an example on the NRCS TSP website if you'd like to see the full thing. But just to kind of demonstrate that, again, that independence, that they are responsible for their own work. So the first example is that the TSP is going to do the work so that it meets NRCS standards and specifications, that they will comply with all federal, state, local, tribal laws for those services, and that they're legally responsible for their own technical services. So TSP services really fall into two primary categories. So we have the conservation activities, CPA, DIA, or CMAs, and you can see those are the acronyms for those longer. The one we're going to talk about more today is the design and implementation activity. That's really more related to the irrigation support itself. And then we have what we call the 900 series, which is more specific to a conservation practice that might be in a funded contract. So TSPs can again help with the design of that specific conservation practice. That's the 911. They can be there again for technical support during that installation process. They're not doing the installation themselves through this 912 service. They're just assisting with the technical support during installation. And then 913 is the checkout. They certify that that practice has been complete to NRCS standards and specs and what that final quantity is, excuse me. And we'll discuss these in more depth in the next few slides. So an irrigation engineer, an irrigation TSP might be working on a project for an NRCS customer that has one or more of these irrigation conservation practices. So these are just some of the more common NRCS conservation practices that you might see for an irrigation related project. Each of the NRCS conservation practices has a code. So you might hear someone refer to something by its code or its name. So we'll kind of walk through the process here, right? This is pretty simplified, but just gives everyone a better idea of what that process looks like. So we have a farmer, they come to NRCS and want some type of support, that's related to a natural resource concern, because being NRCS, that's what our focus is. That's what our programs do, is support natural resource concerns and try to provide solutions for them. So we would develop a conservation plan, a summary of what those goals are. In a case that's related to irrigation, we can say maybe you have a farmer that wants to convert from sprinkler irrigation to drip irrigation. And the resource concern that would be addressed there is a water saving. So water use would decrease, and that would be the resource concern that's being addressed through our programs. Uh, that same farmer can then apply for an NRCS financial assistance program. And the primary one that occurs through is the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP, right? So that's a financial support program that provides an incentive payment for someone to adopt some type of conservation practice that addresses their resource concern. So in this situation, they would apply for funding to support that installation of that drip system to replace the sprinkler system that would reduce their water use. It is a competitive program, so that application has to be ranked. And if they are selected for funding, we would sign a contract, and that NRCS program participant would then have that funding allocated for that irrigation system. Our payment rates are, in a situation like irrigation, are typically per acre, and they are reimbursement payments. So all of our payments are done after the installation of the conservation practice or after the TSP service is complete. If that producer would like to use a TSP for any of those TSP services we described before, then we would add additional funding to that contract to provide them funding to then pay the TSP. So what does that TSP work look like? So again, kind of going back to those two main categories that we talked about before, that design and implementation activity 163, there's a separate document for this that lists out the deliverables. And this is just kind of a couple little clips from it. I think, I believe that document is, again, 3 or 4 pages. But just to show you the deliverables, the TSP work that they would be doing to receive that funding that is obligated in the NRCS contract is listed out pretty clearly. These are the specific deliverables that TSP would perform for the DIA 163 design and implementation. This is a irrigation water management design. And if they're doing one of the 900 series that is specific to that conservation practice, we have a different document called the Statement of Work that would, again, list out what those deliverables are. And the NRCS Field Office Technical Guide is where you would find all of these documents, and there's specific drop downs when you go to the Field Office Technical Guide website for the state. So it's really important to look at the state that you're going to be working in to see what those deliverables are. They do vary a little bit. Besides the design, which we just discussed, the farmer can also choose to use a TSP again for that installation oversight, kind of the quality assurance, or the certification of that practice. And again, we have additional funding that would be in that contract for those services as well. And again, those deliverables are also on that statement of work document. So once the project is done, once that irrigation system is installed, or once the TSP service, one or more of those TSP services are completed, such as, design might be something that's completed before the actual installation of the project, then those deliverables, that work product is submitted to NRCS. NRCS does an administrative review to make sure all the deliverables are complete, and then we process the payment. So again, they're done after the fact. Our typical method of payment is direct deposit. So any payment, whether it's for the practice itself, that irrigation system itself, or for TSP services, is done through direct deposit. And our default goes to the program participant, whoever's name is on that contract. We do have the option of an assignment of payment form that the program participant can submit that would redirect that funding directly to really any bank account of their choosing. In this case, it might be the TSPs or a business account, something like that. So it doesn't actually have to pass through the hands of the program participant if the funding is for the TSP service. Also, if the TSP let me back up. If that program participant has completed the practice, that the irrigation system is installed, that payment for the system can also be redirected with the assignment of payment form to the company that maybe installed that irrigation system. So what does that look like? So this is a very simplified version of what a contract, an NRCS contract might be. So we have contract item number 1, the micro irrigation system itself. So this is funding for the irrigation system. It's meant to cover the labor and materials to install this replacement irrigation system. And there's a dollar amount per acre in that contract. And these numbers are a little older. They're just meant here to show as an example. So that is the dollar amount that is for the irrigation system itself. Let's say that farmer wanted to use a TSP for 911, 912, and 913, we would add additional contract items to that contract that are specific for that technical assistance from the TSP, again, per acre. So that would be paid. So if they wanted to do an assignment of payment for the TSP services, they could. If they wanted to assign the funds for the irrigation system itself to the contractor or business who installed that system, they can. It's completely up to them. So, especially in the irrigation industry, we see this a lot where that TSP might also have a business or be employed by an irrigation company that can do the work, that can install that irrigation system. And it's absolutely fine for the TSP to be the same as the contractor. This is really important. There are different roles, there's different responsibilities, and as you just saw, there's different funding sources for those two roles, but there's no problem for that to overlap. So as a TSP, you're hired by that program participant, you're in our Find a TSP database, and you're providing that technical support during the process, right? So the outcome there is that technical support, those deliverables that we saw. Versus the contractor, you're also hired by the program participant, but you're hired to install that conservation practice. And the outcome there is a conservation practice and irrigation system that meets NRCS standards and specifications. So again, no conflict of interest there. You can perform both roles if that farmer chooses to hire you for both. So we'll walk through what it looks like to become an NRCS certified TSP. So again, you have to be formally certified by NRCS for those services in those locations that you would like to offer those services. And those vary by whether it's a conservation activity, conservation practice, or which state or territory you're becoming certified in. So it's really important to look to see the specifics there. It's typically a combination or sometimes one of these, but we have some technical trainings or at least one that you might have to complete free of charge by NRCS. Be related to work experience, might be a professional certification is required. Each state might have state-specific considerations, requirements that that specific state would like to make sure their TSPs have in place, and sometimes you have to submit a sample of work. There are, as I mentioned before, on our website, we have both the TSP certification agreement example, but we also have the requirements, the national and state requirements to become a TSP on our website as well. So step one, so you'd really want to look at, which of the irrigation related conservation practices would be right for you to become a certified TSP for. And the Field Office Technical Guide is a great resource for that. You can also look at our state payment schedules for EQIP. So each state has its own list of those reimbursement rates, those payment rates that we looked at before for the fiscal year that we're in. So if you look at the state payment schedule for Colorado for FY25, which is just about to end, will be a new one in the near future for FY26, then you could see which practices that state offers and what those payment rates are, including payment rates for TSPs. So then really you do need to assess your own qualifications, right? Do you meet the national criteria for those practices or activities? Do you meet the state criteria for those practices or activities? And if you go to our website, as I mentioned before, this is where those links are and what they look like. This is just a screenshot, but you can see there's a state level requirement spreadsheet and a national TSP requirement spreadsheet. So step three, NRCS registry is the software we use, the website we use for the application. It's for TSPs manage what their certification is in case you want to add or remove practices, services, add or remove locations. So NRCS registry, and there's a link to this on our TSP website as well. You always apply as an individual. So even if you work for a company, you individually have to be qualified to be a TSP. But once you are certified, you can actually link your name to the business name. So if you'd prefer to have the company name listed in the Find a TSP database, and that's where a farmer would go in and look to see what certified TSPs are available in their location, you can have the business name populate instead of the individual name, but there still has to be certified TSPs behind that business name. So we did a quick review, and I'm fairly certain that the only required training for those irrigation conservation practices that we showed before is the TSP orientation and conservation planning. It's available on AgLearn, which is our standard learning website, but we also have recordings and we're also doing live versions of this. It's about a 3.5 hour live webinar. We have one scheduled for later this month. It's also the link for the registration for that is on the TSP website. So not too much required trainings for the irrigation related practices and certifications. And then you would in registry upload that whatever those qualifications are that you meet for the national and state criteria. So you would upload those, you would complete the trainings. If there's a sample of work required, you would upload that there. And the sample of work is going to mimic those deliverables for whatever conservation activity or practice that you're applying for. And then you would submit the application and it goes to the folks on my staff on the TSP branch to do the initial review. And then it might go out to the states in which you're applying if there's a state level requirement that then they would review and approve. Once all the reviews and approvals are done, then you are approved as a TSP. Your name shows up on the Find a TSP database and you can get to work. You have to be a certified TSP before you can do any of the work of a TSP. So TSP number has to be active. And then the last slide I'm going to share with you is just an example of, this is our irrigation water management practice code 449. This is an example of what our FY25 national level criteria for certification looks like. If you go to that spreadsheet, you can sort by discipline lead. So engineering, water / irrigation, if you sort by that, it'll show you all of the related practices. And then you can look to see what options there are. So 449 actually has 3 different options for certification. Not all of our practices or activities have 3. Some of them have less. But you can see this one as a good example of the variations, right? So it has just experience. If you have 8 years of experience and you document that and you upload it in registry when you submit your application, then you would be qualified. If you have a combination of education and experience, this has fewer years of experience because you have that education component, then you would be qualified. And the last option for 449 is the professional certification. You can see there's actually 2 of the IA certification types on this. So if you have one of these certification types, then you are qualified for the national criteria to be a certified TSP for NRCS. Yeah, so as you're looking through there, you'll just see there's different combinations. So it's, for you to look to see if you're qualified and what you're interested in. You can also look at the payment rates to see if, these make sense for you and make that decision if being a TSP is a good move for you and your business, whatever that might look like. So that is my last slide. I will stop sharing here. Nope, I will not. I am already stopped sharing. Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Frank.
Looks like you're still sharing, but let's see if I can share over you.
Oh, there we go. Did I get it?
You got it. So fair warning, we do not use Zoom on a day-to-day. So see how this goes. Beautiful. Once again, I'm Frank Tovez. I'm the president and CEO of Avid Water. I'm actually based here on the coast in Castroville today. So nice, beautiful weather over here. I want to give you kind of a perspective from the contractor side, as well as being a TSP. Like I mentioned, we have 3 TSPs on staff. So I'll be honest and say that it's a team that we have a great team that gets the work done for us. And even this presentation was helped by our design engineer manager. So I think she's here. Thank you, Luz. So from paperwork to paycheck, the goal of a TSP is to complete a project as smoothly as possible to allow the grower to receive payment and to get payment from the NRCS. So it's important to set yourself up for success by familiarizing yourself with the necessary processes, the documentation, and the deliverables for each practice. Communication with the NRC staff and the grower is also important part of keeping a project on track and running smoothly. I will say from experience, getting to know your local field office is critical. A lot of times, this TSP program may not be relatively known throughout the offices. There's a lot of changes. So really familiarize yourself with the local offices, the people in those places, and really get to know them so it can help this process out and you have the growers and the participants more comfortable with using a TSP. So the common practices that we participate in are the ones here listed. I know Allison showed a bunch that are available. We 441, 442, 449, 430, and 533. These all have requirements and checklists and other documents. These are the practices that are most encountered in the ag environment, while the specific requirements and deliverables vary for practice. The process is pretty similar. For each practice that you frequently see, you should have a toolkit prepared that contains the requirements, checklists, document structure, and deliverables that allows you to easily manage and complete the project as a TSP. This ensures that things move smoothly and efficiently for the TSPs, the growers, and the NRC staff themselves. So EQIP TSP Starter Toolkit. We have these 5 things listed here. The scope of work is for each practice. A scope of work as a TSP should be established. This will clearly outline the growers what parts of the practice that you are responsible for. The scope should focus on all parts of the practice that you're contracted on as a TSP: design, installation, checkout. Each part requires a different set of documentation. It is the responsibility of the TSP to clearly communicate their scope and establish any necessary contracts between the TSP and the grower. Checklists. Once the scope has been established, you'll need a checklist to verify that the necessary work and inspections have been completed to NRC standards. For example, verification of an irrigation system will include pictures of the pipe, the thrust block, and other required components as installed. This checklist should include all of these to ensure completeness of the documentation. The photo log structure. Some of these practices will require a lot of photos at different points of the project. It's important to organize these photos at each stage. Creating a template for the structure of the photo organization will make things fast and efficient for collecting and checking later on. And as Allison mentioned, and as I mentioned previously, we're also a contractor and a TSP. So this process we kind of build in with our scope of work if we're the TSP on a EQIP funded project. And then as-built sheets. So projects can change and may look different by the end. We all know that. Make sure to document all these changes and create as-built designs at the end of the project to avoid any delays in verification and payment. This is something in our industry we don't do very well as-built drawings. So this actually has helped us standardize that across all the things we do today. And then the field office technical guide. This is the website on the NRC platform that contains all the documentation needed to complete practices to the NRC standards. This will cover the requirements for each practice and the documentation for the duration of the practice, and all the deliverables needed to establish that practice was completed as required. So this is our basic starter toolkit. This field office technical guide, which used to be called something else and had a really funny name. This is where you'll find both the practice standard and the statement of work for each irrigation-related practice. The practice standard defines how the system must be designed, installed, and operated to meet the NRCS criteria. For example, 441 for micro irrigation specifies system capacity, emission uniformity, flushing requirements, and acceptance criteria for things like DU thresholds. The statement of work defines the deliverables you must turn in to show the practice was installed to the standard. So design documents, pre-installation conferences, inspections, DU test summaries, as-built drawings, like I mentioned, and certification. These are the documents that should be used to build project scope templates, photo structures, verifications, and other tools needed for each practice. So we want to build it and prove it. Now, the document essentials, you can see this first photo here on the left has no context. Because it's too close up, it looks like it came out of a catalog. The photo on the right has more context. So the NRCS approvals depend on documentation. Every field in the form needs to be filled out. Photos need to show context, like I said. Save controller programs, map sensor locations, include your DU summaries, and always use a commissioning checklist as a part of that toolkit that we mentioned. Many of the documentation essentials will be outlined by the statement of work for each practice from the field office technical guide. Using it as a reference will ensure that the documentation is gathered properly and that it's complete. So doing all of this will prevent payment rejections or any other further delays. And then some basic admins things. So having an internal QA and QC process documented is as an internal check system. It's as simple as having someone else review the package before it goes to the NRCS, or using a standard checklist that I mentioned. The NRCS reviewers notice when TSPs are sloppy, and have inconsistent submissions. So to ensure that relationship with NRCS and to not have any delays, make sure that you have an internal QA process. Specifically, if the person collecting the data is not the actual certified TSP, that's critical to have that TSP review all the documentation. And then as far as the invoicing requirements go for the TSP services, there's actually a template provided by the NRCS that you can find specifically for the 900 series design checkout services. And then best practices. So deciding on a pricing model, this could be a fixed fee, hourly, or some type of hybrid. You know, the growers want clarity. They want to know what they're paying for, and so does the NRCS. Fixed fees work well for standard practices. Hourly may be better for unusual or complex projects. But keep in mind, cost share programs already set some of the expectations for the funding here, so you don't need to compromise the quality to keep the prices low, like we do in some other instances. And then capacity planning. Peak irrigation seasons can overwhelm some TSPs. Today, there's a need for more TSPs, specifically in California, I know for sure. So make sure that you map out how many projects you have and your team can realistically handle those. If you overcommit, obviously you'll miss deadlines, you'll have some documentation mishaps, and all the work will suffer. It's also important to keep NRC contract timelines in mind to make sure TSP paperwork is being submitted during ideal windows. So growers requesting TSPs on their contracts after the contracts are awarded. So a lot of growers don't know about the TSPs, and they can't decide to use a TSP till after they're funded. So that's important to remember. And then, like I mentioned, having that QA process is critical for scalability and professionalism. If you get these right, you can avoid burnout, keep cash flow steady, and really develop yourself as a reliable partner for the NRCS and for the growers. So really, in summary, what we want to add value. So meet the standards. Every EQIP contract is tied to specific standards, which can be found on the field office technical guide. If the irrigation system or the management plan doesn't meet those standards, the NRCS simply can't certify that practice. That means that the producer loses eligibility for cost sharing funding, which is obviously not ideal. But by following the standard closely and documenting properly, you'll essentially protect the producer's eligibility for current and future programs. Cost share, NRCS approval equals faster payment. So EQIP is a reimbursement program. Producers pay up front and get reimbursed once NRCS verifies the work. If your document is incomplete or confusing, it slows down the process, and that could be a huge burden on the grower's cash flow. When your package is clear, complete, and easy for the NRCS to review, obviously that makes it move more quickly. That means that the producer gets paid faster, and you gain, again, this credibility with the grower and the NRCS staff. And then, trusted records, the documentation you prepare doesn't just disappear after the NRC signs off. Producers often use those records for future funding applications, or they may get a check-in on this project. So by giving them a clean, organized binder, or digitally, you're handing them a long-term asset that they can, again, builds that trust and increases the likelihood that they'll call you back for the next project. So I guess this is the summary slide. Well, what does good look like? When we talk about what good looks like on the EQIP, it really comes down to these four things. First, the system has to meet the practice standard. That is the foundation at core. If the technical criteria are not met, nothing else really matters. Second, you need to deliver the right package. That means submitting all of the required design documents, reports, and certifications. The NRCS really can't move forward until the folder is complete. Third, your documentation should tell the story with proof, photos with context, the D results, commissioning checklists are all what allow NRCS reviewer, who may never even visit the site in these cases, to confidently certify the practice. Finally, the grower should be left with confidence that the system was designed and installed correctly, that the paperwork will not cause any delays, and that they can rely on you as a professional for future projects. If you meet all those four, standards. Then you have it delivered exactly what EQIP expects and exactly what the growers need. That was it.
Bravo. All right. Thanks, Frank. Allison, if you want to come back on, we've got a couple questions here. And just a reminder to folks, if you have any questions for any of our panelists, please drop them in the chat. But let's go ahead and start with this one. From James. James asks, is there a risk that the NRCS reviewers reject the project results and withhold or deny payment? Allison, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I guess project results is kind of variable. So if a TSP is brought in to complete those deliverables and the deliverables are met, and it's really more like I mentioned, is a kind of an administrative review that they're met. NRCS isn't supposed to be redoing any kind of technical work because that's what the TSP funding is meant to be paid or is meant to support. So if the deliverables are met, it meets standards and specifications, and there's an issue with NRCS staff making the payment, um, that's not really a correct way to go about it. They should be processing that payment. Um, there's so many different people and there's so many different comfort levels with this nationally. And the TSP branch is pretty new. It's about mm, year and a half old. And the reason that this branch was stood up again was because it was recognized that not only are TSPs are incredibly valuable asset to our customers, improves our customer service, but that we need support from the inside to train our staff and to make sure they understand what the processes are. So that's what we're doing. There may be situations where there's a miscommunication or misunderstanding, but there isn't. We're working towards avoiding that as much as possible. But I think it's really essential for the TSP, the customer, and NRCS staff to all really understand what their individual responsibilities are, so that and discuss those up front so everyone's on the same page with expectations. So one of the things I've really been promoting is those upfront conversations, those upfront communications. Let's go through deliverables and make sure we're all on the same page. And even though that might be a few extra minutes up front, that saves a lot of time in the long run. So if anyone's having that experience, the other option would be to reach out to the NRCS regional coordinator for your area. There's a map on the website, the TSP website, and they can always help facilitate those conversations too. But that should not be an issue in an ideal situation.
Awesome. Thanks for that answer, Allison, and thanks for the question, James. Really appreciate that. Allison, we do have another couple questions in the chat asking if the registry site is working, and just sounds like some technical issues with actually accessing the TSP login.
Right.
Any resources you could share?
Yeah, so we did the registry is fairly new as well. They redid that about a year ago, and it is meant to be a better interface, an easier interface, but we're still working out a lot of bugs, and unfortunately, a lot of our IT support went away recently, so it's not a lot of those resolutions aren't happening as quickly as we'd like. For anyone who's not able to access it, I did see some of those comments in the chat. Again, reach out to those TSP branch regional coordinators. They are customer facing, they're TSP facing, and they will be able to help you log in or move through those steps. So that's literally what those positions are for, is to help TSPs navigate the TSP experience, including registry, whether you're a new TSP or an existing TSP. So go to the TSP website, look at the map, and whichever of the regional coordinators covers your state, contact them by email, and they should be able to help you.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much for that. And Frank, I'm going to hand a question over to you from Aubrey. Aubrey, thanks very much for this question. And again, thanks for joining us. Good to see your name. Aubrey asks, how many NRCS projects have you personally completed as a TSP, a contractor, or both?
Very good question. So we have several salespeople on our staff, and I mentioned I have 3 TSPs with us. So personally, I've done several of these, both as the contractor and the TSP. I've been actually contacted for. I've had this certification for several years, and I used to get a lot of inquiries that were not irrigation related. So that was interesting. But we have just now started promoting this internally because a lot of growers are not familiar with this program, and some of the NRCS field offices honestly aren't familiar with it as well. So, to answer the question, we're doing a lot more than we did last year for sure, and that's why we decided to have more of our staff become TSPs. We have a marketing push behind this. We recognize that there's a definite need, especially if there's going to be more EQIP funding coming, which we hope. So
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for that answer, Frank. And again, Aubrey, thanks for that question. Speaking of EQIP funding, Gil asks, are the priorities set for the upcoming EQIP cycle, and are the appropriations allocated under the new Farm Bill? Allison, I'll probably hand that over to you. And then Andrew, if you want to speak to anything that Allison doesn't cover, I'd invite you to jump in as well.
Yeah, and I have to say, I am not in the loop on a lot of that stuff. I'm pretty focused into the TSP world. Um, I don't believe that there's actually numbers out, but again, I'm just sort of going off of what might have stuck in my brain. I know that there's going to be some changes to our programs. There's some proposed changes to another one of our programs, the Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP. Um, as far as EQIP itself goes, I know they're consolidating some of our practice scenarios. As far as actual allocations, I'm not familiar with if any numbers have been developed yet or released yet.
I can jump in on some of the big picture funding, and then Allison, maybe this connects to something we could dig in a little more on. But and Luke, could I go on Audible and actually share my screen real quick? I have a presentation I gave last week out at the California Ag Irrigation Association.
Yeah, please do that. Go
All
ahead.
right. Make sure we do this. All right, is that coming up? Great. So this is a summary just at that very high congressional level of recent EQIP funding changes. And you can see these are for FY26 through FY31. And these were the Inflation Reduction Act numbers here. And you can see there was, when the One Big Beautiful Bill Act passed, they rescinded some of the supplemental funds that were in the IRA, but they increased the baseline funding. So if you look at the bottom line for the next few years here, the funding levels are about the same. And this is mandatory funding, so it does not require additional appropriations. So this funding will be available nationally for the EQIP program, and that kind of funnels down to the states and then to all sorts of practices, including irrigation-related practices. Sorry about that, scrolled too far. So this is the details. I'm happy to send this. There's an article that substantially covers this on the link I shared earlier. But if you look at this last column, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act baseline funding, these are the funding allocations mandatory for FY26 or FY31. So you can see it grows over the next few years and then stays steady at about 3.2 billion. We also did a little work just to figure out how much money is currently going to irrigation-related practices nationally. And here's the data we pulled from the NRCS website for obligations for irrigation practices through FY24. So you can see it started to increase. And overall, the funding has been increasing through these programs, whether that's the 2018 Farm Bill, the IRA, or the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And so this is kind of as you get down to our specific industry where these funds have been going historically. And again, the Big Beautiful Bill Act is mandatory funding, so we don't need further appropriations. Also, that bill addressed a number of things that would typically be included in a farm bill. So it's unclear whether we'll have any sort of farm bill in the near term or midterm. But the funding for this program was addressed in the One Big Beautiful Bill.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that, Andrew. And thanks for pulling up those slides. Really appreciate that information. And thanks to Gil for that really great question. I appreciate that as well. All right, I'm going to come to a question here from Christina. Christina, thanks for joining us and thanks for the question. Christina asks, am I understanding correctly that I could become certified as a TSP for installation and not necessarily the plan writing? So I'll turn that over to whoever wants to answer.
Yeah, so absolutely. So the way the TSP certifications kind of boil down is you would pick what you want to become certified for in either a conservation activity, so the CPAs, DIAs, CMAs are actually not a different thing, but the CPA or a DIA, so in this case, the DIA 163 would probably be most relevant, or a conservation practice. If you're certified for a conservation practice, you become certified for 911, 912, and 913, the design, installation, oversight, and checkout. So the plan writing is a different thing. It would be under that one of those CPAs, the conservation planning activities, and those do typically have more training requirements. They are like a more of a general upfront conservation plan where the goals of the client are documented, assessments, different modeling might be done to establish an issue with water use or something like that. It is much more involved. Typically that's not a role we see a lot of engineers pursuing. So yes, you can become certified for the DIA 163 and the conservation practices. I will also add the DIA 163, you can kind of think of it as like a basket. It's not, you're certified to complete it, but you also have to be certified for the practices you would be designing in that basket. And that's going to vary from farmer to farmer, from contract to contract. So you can pursue certification for DA 163, but you would also want to be certified for those individual conservation practices you would be designing within that overall effort. But yes, planning absolutely does not have to be involved.
And I would add that the being at as this is an IA webinar, that being a certified irrigation designer and certified ag irrigation specialist are two of the certifications that are accepted among some of the practices for to become a TSP. So, and I know there's an MOU in the works. I'm not sure where we're at with it, but that would allow this process to become much more smoother and easier and encourage more certified IA professionals to participate in the TSP program.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Frank. And of course, if anyone has any questions about becoming certified through the IA or anything else, please do reach out to us. We're always happy to talk about that process and how it can be of benefit to you and your irrigation practices. Thanks for that question very much, Christina. Really appreciate that. Let's see. I've got a question here from Tim Gavin. Tim, hope you're having a great week. Nice to see your name on the webinar. Tim asks, I may have missed this. However, can you define the time frame between approval and payment?
I'll tell you what policy says, and then maybe Frank can chime in with some real life experience. NRCS policy says it's a 30-day max between when the work products, the completed work products, are submitted to NRCS, and when the payment should appear or be processed. If everything is in place, it can be a lot shorter than that. We probably the last 10 years or so, we've changed our system to where it can even be about a week between when we submit everything. But once that paperwork, those work products, those deliverables are submitted and RCS checks them, we go in, we into our software and say, yes, this has been completed, put in that bank account information, and then that can be a pretty quick process. So it just really depends on if all of those deliverables are like, I love that Frank had those slides about really making sure that those materials are clear or in place and organized and the photo documentation is correct. Because if there's any issues with that type of thing and then there's back and forth, and that can always delay payment for both, like he said, the customer, the farmer, and for the TSP.
Yeah, I would second that. Typically, it's 1 to 2 weeks to see payment if everything is aligned, like Allison mentioned. Also, it's important to remember that if the payment's going to the producer or the grower, there could inherently be a delay to get it to the TSP from there. So we always recommend being upfront with the grower on redirecting those funds to the TSP directly. That also makes it quicker.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you both for that answer, and thanks again to Tim for tossing a question our way. So we've got just a few minutes left here. I just dropped into the chat as we come to the conclusion of our webinar. Just want to invite folks to please reach out to me with any questions. I did just want to drop a housekeeping note in here before I forget. We will post this webinar on YouTube. It will be available for viewing afterwards. I had a couple of questions about the slides, if those would be available. I'll touch base with our presenters after the webinar and see if they're comfortable sharing those slides. But you can reach out to me if you're interested in getting those, and I'll get you an answer on that a little later. Allison, Frank, before we wrap things up, any final thoughts, any comments, anything about the TSP program you'd love to share before we shut it down?
I would say, as far as learning more, kind of getting more of the details, there are some good resources on YouTube on the NRCS channel. We just posted a training, a 1 hour training we did last month, August. That's an introduction to the TSP program. That's some of the same slides we showed today, but again, it's longer, kind of goes into more depth into things for general TSP program. But then there's also some shorter videos, 2, 3, 4 minutes on some of the conservation practices. And it can be a good resource for anyone who's just wanting to learn more about NRCS programs, conservation practices, and the TSP program.
And I would say that I encourage anybody who's certified or, ag irrigation dealers that have certified personnel on staff to become a TSP. This inherently creates some competition for us, but I think brings the industry up forward, which I think all of us should have that in mind. So we always help our competitors, and we help other people if they feel like this is a daunting task. Going through the process at first is cumbersome, but is rewarding in the end. And like I mentioned, if you build those checklists and you do those simple things, this becomes easier and easier as you do these projects.
Okay, excellent. Andrew, do you have any parting thoughts you'd like to share with the class before we wrap it up?
Now, I just add on to what Frank was mentioning. We are in discussions with NRCS about how to streamline the process for people who hold our certifications. We aren't quite to the point of ready to launch that, but we are working because we too see the value in this program from our association perspective, and appreciate the value and the time people put into getting our certification. So we're working on that. So look out for updates from us, hopefully in the near term, about how that might make this even easier for y'all.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Andrew. And we got one. We'll take this final question here from James. And James asked, "What is the time frame for being certified through IA?" Frank, I'm going to turn that over to you. About how long did it take you to get, let's say, any of your certifications from sort of when you decided that you wanted to pursue certification to when you actually passed the test and received word?
I would say it's highly variable. I mean, when I first took the CID test, there were 3 exams. It's since been reduced to 2. Really, it's how much work are you willing to put in to study the material. You can take these tests now like electronically, so you can get results instantaneously for that instant gratification or otherwise. So really, I would say studying and then taking some classes really is the most time consuming here. But you can, if you apply today, you can get certified in the next 3 months.
I love that. I love that. Thanks very much, Frank. And no doubt you only received good news whenever you took your exams. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, just want to thank you again for joining us for our webinar today. We certainly appreciate your attendance, and it's really nice to see some familiar names, and just really appreciate you being a part of our community and really raising the bar for the entire irrigation industry. So Frank, Allison, Desi, and Andrew and Emil, of course, thank you very much for joining us today. And we hope everyone has a great rest of your week and a great weekend. Thanks very much.